lids is a complicated yet rewarding endeavor. Master potter Bill Van Gilder is about to show you how to make them out of stoneware clay right now on DIY's Throwing Clay. Bill Van Gilder loves to design useful pottery with a natural, organic look. He's developed his own distinctive style over the 30 years he's been throwing pots.
I'm going to show you how to make a set of 4 canisters. We're going to make 2 small canisters, a medium, and a large. I'm going to show you how to make a drop-in lid and how to apply some glazes in this sort of landscape effect. Now, the clay I've chosen is this red-brown clay, and that's important to me because it mixes so well with these glaze colors.
To make the canister set, you'll need 19.5 pounds of clay, a wooden rib, a soft rubber rib, a ruler, measuring calipers, some bats, a cut-off wire, a teardropped trimming tool, a trimming tool, a soup ladle, wax-resist emulsion, and glazes.
So let's get our clay ready.
Bill cuts, weighs, and kneads 4 lumps of clay. 2 2¼ pound lumps, a 3½ pound lump, and a 4½ pound lump.
Let's go over to the wheel and go to work. I'm going to make the smallest canister first. I'm going to use a 2¼ pound lump of clay and center it with a fast wheel speed and plenty of water. Now this is a cylinder form, so I'm going to open the clay a little wider than I actually want it and draw the clay inward and upward. That moves all the clay from the foot of the pot upward toward the rim. Now I keep it in a conical shape as I make it from the foot to the rim. I'm going to cut a groove at the foot of the pot with my thumb tip. That's a place for my outside fingers to lodge themselves and push the clay upward. The next step is to form a gallery or ledge at the top of the rim. This will support the lid. To do that, watch this closely because it happens fast. I'm going to roll this rim inward in one motion.
Bill forces the clay inward over his fingers, supporting the outside of the rim with his thumb. Then he slows the wheel and pushes the rim down with his thumb to make the ledge.
That ledge is going to support the lid.
There are several gallery and lid combinations you can make for this canister set. Bill's put a few variations on DIYnetwork.com.
Next step is to take our first measurement.
The small canister opening should be 4½ inches. Measure often for a good fit.
That's pretty close, but I'm going to give it a little more space. I don't want that lid to be locked into the rim. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to finish the rest of the canister.
Bill removes excess clay from the bottom and flattens the sides with his wooden rib.
I'm going to tuck in this corner of the rib right underneath the rim of my piece.
The groove Bill creates at the rim looks nice, but it also reinforces the ledge inside the rim. Next, he mops out any water with a small sponge on a stick.
I'm going to use a small sponge to clean up and smooth all the edges and take one more measurement. That looks pretty good. Let's cut the piece loose from the wheel head and with dry hands lift it to the wear board.
Next, Bill throws the second small canister, making sure it's about the same height as the first one, 6¼ inches.
All right, I'm going to make the medium-sized canister next. I'm going to make it on a wooden bat.
Bill uses a bat for larger pieces so he can lift it off the wheel when he's finished without harming the pot. This canister will have a lid opening of 5½ inches.
And that's a great measurement. You know, if you stretch this too far, you're in trouble. It's hard to get it back in. So better to make it too small and stretch it outward. All right, we're going to cut the canister free from the bat.
When DIY's Throwing Clay continues, Bill fashions some decorative knobs on perfectly fitted lids. Welcome back to Throwing Clay. Bill is making a canister set. So far, he's thrown 2 small cylinder-shaped canisters directly on the wheel head. He made a gallery, or ledge, for the lid at the top of each rim by rolling the clay inward over his fingers and then pressing it down. He measured the openings carefully to be sure the lids would fit. He then made a medium-sized canister on a bat.
Now this large canister, I use the same techniques as the small and medium ones. It's a bit more clay, so just take your time. I throw it into pretty much a cone shape. When it's the right height, I'll then open it up to its correct measurement. I removed a lot of the water from the outside of this larger jar. Too much water means it gets too soft too fast, and it can collapse.
Bill measures the canister for a 6.5-inch opening. It's too small.
So this is where I do the stretching. I grasp the rim inside and outside and just slowly pull it outward parallel to the wheel head. That looks pretty good. Let's get the water out of the inside of the jar and finish straightening the sides.
Bill softens the rim with his sponge and takes a final measurement. Then he cuts the canister from the bat. Now he'll make the lids.
I'm going to use a 6-pound lump of clay. And I'm going to throw the first 3 lids off the top of this hump. You'll want to make the canisters and the lids at the same time, or one right after the other. In that case, they'll dry at the same rate. I'm bringing up a doorknob of clay on the top of this hump. And when you begin learning this process, the most you can do is estimate it, which is what I'm doing. Push downward, and right there is the knob. And pull this outward. And basically, there's your lid.
Bill resets his calipers to 4.5 inches and measures the first lid.
Looks great. I'm going to remove the excess water from the lid and finish the knob. I put a little swirl in the top of it with my thumb tip. Start at the center and draw my thumb tip outward. Before I remove it from the hump, I'm going to take one more measurement. That looks good.
Bill makes a groove under the lid with a rib and cuts it free with the wire.
Now I'm going to use wet fingertips, keep the wheel moving, slide my fingers under the lid, and pop it up and away. Let's make another one.
Bill makes a second small lid. His first measurement shows that it's too small. He draws up some more clay and widens the lid. His next measurement is right on target.
Wow, that knob is far too tall. So I'm going to take some of it off by just pinching lightly and shortening it.
Bill makes sure the knob will be easy to grasp. Then he adds the swirl on top and takes a final measurement before cutting the lid free.
Okay, let's make the medium lid now. Same techniques as the small lid.
As Bill increases the size of the lid, he increases the proportions of the knob. This time he stops the wheel to cut off the lid, taking care not to warp it. Now he'll make the largest lid.
I'm not going to make this large canister lid on the hump. I'm going to make it here by itself on the wheel head. I'm going to need a lot of clay underneath to support this wide disc, and it's easier done on the wheel head than on that hump of clay.
Bill uses 1 pound of clay for the largest lid, which will be 6.5 inches wide. He throws it using the same techniques as before. When he's done, he lifts it onto the wear board.
I'm going to move my hands opposite me, pop the lid up, and tickle my fingers underneath the edge, and keep the lid on the tips of my fingers, and drop the edge. Okay, that's all the pieces for the canister set thrown. Let's let them get leather hard. We'll get them trimmed and see how these lids fit.
Coming up on DIY's Throwing Clay, Bill trims all the pieces on a flat pad and a handy stand known as a chuck. Welcome back to Throwing Clay. Bill Van Gilder is making a canister set. So far, he's thrown 4 canisters, 2 small, a medium, and a large. He created galleries at the top of each rim to hold the lids. Then he threw the 3 smallest lids off the hump from the same lump of clay. He shaped a rounded knob with a swirl on top for each lid. Then he threw the largest lid directly on the wheel head. When he was finished, he set all the pieces aside to dry until they were leather hard.
The canisters are leather hard. The next step is to trim the foot of each canister and to trim the bottom of each lid. I'm going to trim the canisters on a pad of clay. Let me show you something. If you're not very good at making a flat clay pad, use your wire tool, wrap it around your finger, and stretch it from the center to the edge. It's a great shortcut to get this pad perfectly flat.
A flat pad keeps the canister level for trimming. The clay pad also helps grip the canister to the wheel. To help with centering, Bill uses the rib to mark some circles on the trimming pad. When the first canister is centered, he pats it down to hold it in place.
I trim with a medium speed, and I keep my 2 hands connected. I'm trimming off just enough to round this edge. It's not very thick down there, so I don't want to take off too much clay. I'm going to burnish the edge with this soft rubber rib. That pushes all the aggregate or the sand back into the clay. A little more smoothing with a sponge, and you get a nice smooth surface. The last thing I'm going to do is put my signature stamp near the foot of the pot. Okay, I'm going to work my way through my set of jars. All right, it's time to get the lids trimmed. We're going to remove the pad and create what we call a chuck.
A chuck is simply a short, fat cylinder. Bill will invert the lids on top so he can trim them without damaging their knobs.
You want to make a deep cylinder and one with a dry rim. If you leave the water on the rim, you'll never get the lid off the chuck. It'll stick like glue. I'm going to use a loop trimming tool and cut away this rough edge first. The next step is to create a wax line. That's a little ledge, about ½ inch from the rim. That'll be our guide later on when we apply wax on the lid. I'm just going to burnish these surfaces with my fingertip.
Next, Bill will hollow out the knob. If he didn't, the solid lump of clay would explode in the kiln as the water inside heats up. First, he makes a hole behind the knob with a teardropped trimming tool.
I'm going to put the point of the tool the very center of the back of the lid and push it inward. Last thing I'm going to do is use this hole cutter, and I'm going to push it down into the back side of the knob. Not too far, because I don't want to come out the end of the knob. That creates a hole down the center of the knob. Okay, let's see how this first lid fits. Pretty good fit.
Bill trims the rest of the lids. He uses a sharp trimming tool and a fast wheel speed to keep things uniform. When he's finished, the largest lid doesn't fit.
Okay, I want to show you an important detail. The lid doesn't fit right now, but when it's bone dry, it will. So just be patient. Don't trim any more away from the lid at this stage. I'm going to dry these 2 pieces separately, and I'm going to dry the smallest and the medium canisters with their lids in place. When the whole set's bone dry, we'll get them into the kiln for their first firing.
Bill lets the canisters dry for about 48 hours until they are bone dry. Then he loads them in the kiln for the bisque firing. The kiln fires for 10 to 12 hours and then cools for at least 24 hours before Bill can unload it. Next on DIY's Throwing Clay, Bill creates a landscape effect with a ladle. Welcome back to Throwing Clay. Bill is making a canister set. So far, he's thrown 4 cylinders and 4 lids, measuring carefully to make sure the lids would all fit the canisters. When the pieces were leather hard, he trimmed the bottoms of the canisters on a flat clay pad. Then he threw a short cylinder, or chuck, to support the lids while he trimmed them. Finally, he hollowed out the knobs to be sure they wouldn't explode in the kiln. When the pieces were bone dry, he fired them in the bisque kiln. Now the canister set is ready for glazing.
I'm going to show you how I put this really cool landscape pattern at the bottom of each canister. I discovered how to do that by running some glaze tests. I'm going to use nutmeg glaze overall on all the canisters, and then I'm going to landscape this variegated blue glaze on the top. Where they cross over, I get this kind of greeny color. That's what makes this technique so cool looking.
First, Bill waxes the areas where he doesn't want any glaze. To wax the lids, he stands them on a cylinder.
Now when I trim these lids, if you remember, I created a wax line, and I'm going to apply my wax resist right up to that line. I will let that dry and get the inside of the rim waxed also. And now we're going to reverse the canister, get the bottom waxed.
Bill puts down newspaper to protect the rim in case there's any wax on the banding wheel.
Now I'm going to work my way through all the pots, putting wax on all the lids, the galleries, and the bottoms.
Now that all the canisters and lids are waxed, Bill is ready to glaze. He starts with the lids.
I can't set them down once they're glazed because I want glaze here too. So I'm just going to drop them back into their rim. But I'm going to hold them on the waxed areas only. 1, 2, and out.
Bill uses the same technique to glaze the rest of the lids. When they are dry, Bill cleans any excess glaze from the waxed rims.
The next step is to get each jar dipped about 2/3 of the way down in the nutmeg glaze.
First, Bill ladles glaze into the canister. To coat the inside well, he rotates the canister slowly as he pours out the glaze. Then he dips the outside.
1, 2, and out. I try and put the same coating on each canister. They'll come out looking the same.
Bill goes through the same process with the rest of the canisters and cleans any glaze from the waxed areas.
All right, now I'm ready to apply the landscaping. This is my favorite part. And I'll tell you why. No 2 times does it ever come out the same. It's like, this is where the art comes in.
Glazing technique can make all the difference in a finished piece. Bill's put some glazing ideas on DIYnetwork.com.
I'm going to let gravity actually decorate the piece. The glaze is going to run around the side into a pattern. It's kind of random. Actually wait quite a long time for it to dry in place. What I don't want to do is turn it upright and have it run sideways. It's a real thin thread of glaze going on each time. And I just keep building up until I've got the pattern I'm looking for.
Bill decorates the rest of the canisters using the first glaze. Next, he'll switch to the variegated blue glaze.
Now my first pour is right across the straight line of the big dip. I don't want a straight line anywhere on these canisters.
Bill finishes up the rest of the canisters, leaving some clay bare as part of the landscape design.
Okay, we're done. These glazes are going to look great as they combine with the bare clay down below. Let's take them over to the kiln and get them fired.
Bill loads the canisters in the kiln, making sure no glazed parts touch one another or the kiln shelf. The kiln heats up over 10 to 12 hours to 2200 degrees Fahrenheit. Then it cools for at least 24 hours before Bill can open the lid and unload it.
This canister set is really practical, and the sizes are great. They'll look good in any kitchen. I'm Bill Van Gilder. Have fun in the studio.